to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal. Protonic reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rock about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And they got away.
You know, that's my take on what's heroes.
Protonic Reversal.
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It's a scientific fact that we're all up in your face. It is time once again for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. Getting a little chilly out there over here, but yeah, here we are. Another fantastic November episode. Last one before I'm out for some West Coast tour dates, ironically, because my guest is from the West Coast and lives there as well. Paul Roessler. So excited to talk to him. Let me do this real quick. Welcome to Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. I'm your host, Conan Neutron. I am a rock and roll lifer who has toured and recorded for over 22 years, most known for the band Conan Neutron, The Secret Friends. Music is a huge part of my life, and I use the format of this long-running podcast to talk about music with musicians whose work I enjoy and respect. Folks that may or may not be household names, but do something very special. This is episode 312. If this is your first time listening to the show, all the archives are at protonicreversal.com and are always free, no ads, no sponsors, no kidding. If you would like to support the show, though, and get episodes sooner, you can give $1 a month to patreon.com/protonicreversal. If you like the show, or even just a single episode, please feel free to share it along, like, subscribe, or post a review. All that helps people find the show. It's just the darn nice thing to do. So there you go. It's not very often that I get to have someone who's been this deep in it for this long doing awesome stuff. Of course, you may know him from the Screamers. You may know from his amazing solo work, production work, 45 Grade, playing with Mike Watt. I could sit here and rattle off his entire discography, but at some point we actually want to start talking, so I'm probably not going to do that. Paul Roessler, welcome to the show, man.
Wow, thanks for a nice introduction. 312. That's amazing.
Right? So, yeah, every time I look at that, I was like, God, that's a lot of episodes of this show.
That's impressive. What do you do it once a week?
Yeah, I mean during
something like that.
Peak COVID, I did more. Meaning like spring 2020, I kind of stepped up for a bit. At one point, I was doing 5 a week, but yeah, it basically aggregate total is about once a week. Yeah, especially.
So you got everybody through COVID with your show. Got everybody, kept everyone involved.
The audience increased by about 1,000%. I'm not even exaggerating, which is great. Because I literally had no form of income or hope or any kind of anything at the time, so it was like a life raft for me to be floating on in the middle of the ocean, basically.
I'm sure for other people as well.
Paul, it's so good to have you, man. I'm a huge so I know you mostly from Screamers, which credit where credit's due. I know about Screamers because of Jackrabbit and the Big Takeover, and which, having come from a world of music myself that includes not just like guitar driven punk rock, but bands like Babyland and things like that were punk rock in feel, but not necessarily in sound in the way that you think of like a quote unquote 4-chord punk rock band, 3-chord punk rock band, however many chords there are, guitar, bass, drums, singer, Ramones style, as much as I love that stuff. And I never realized that, as did many, I mean, the Screamers are the first ones really to do it with synth. And now I think it's like, I wouldn't say common, but especially with, in the 90s and whatnot, I think there are certain bands and acts that kind of brought that forward. And, certainly bands like Devo, Kraftwerk, et cetera, et cetera. But it was pretty atypical for quote unquote punk rock at the time. So I'd like to kind of start all the way at the beginning with the Screamers, who I think are absolutely fantastic. And how did the Screamers originally come together?
Well, I get so much mileage out of the Screamers, but it's really
I know you've done a million things, but it's so interesting.
No, it's really important for me because I'm going to start. If I don't explain this, I'm going to start sounding incredibly conceited. The Screamers were already the biggest band in LA when I joined them.
Right.
So they had another keyboard player named David Brown who was really instrumental to their sound, and then they had a temporary guy named Jeff McGregor, and they had the word out that they were looking for the new Screamer, and I got the job. So first of all, I was on probation for 6 months, and but I'd been classically trained. I've been playing for a long time, so I had the chops and everything. And they explained, so it was a real learning experience for me. So I get a lot of credit now and very little blame. And but I mean, I was able to step into it, and but I can't take credit for. So the reason I said I might sound conceited is it's the most amazing band live band for sure I've ever played in. Yeah. And every show I would just stand on stage looking around kind of in awe of what I was a part of. And it's because it would have been impossible to capture that on recording. There are no real studio recordings of it. And so and the people who actually stood before the Screamers are dying off at this point. But as an experience, standing before that band was, it was really unique, and you really felt like you were seeing the future, I think.
Well, and that's the thing. And of course I was not, I was very busy being a small baby at the time, but Tomato to Plenty, especially being like such a compelling front person as well, but also just the presentation of everything and having it have that. Well, I suppose there's like Suicide, right? And like a couple other bands like kind of operate in similar milieus. But I mean, yeah, the live shows were legendary, but Screamers didn't record. That was like the biggest thing of like why they were lost from history for a long time, is because Screamers didn't record.
And I've been trying to make up for that ever since.
Well, so you were playing instruments before joining that band. Had you already been playing in bands at that point?
Yeah, I was a piano player, and I took lessons for 10 years. And I think when I joined the Screamers, I was a piano major at Cal State Northridge. So I was in high school. I was the nerd locked in the band room practicing for hours and hours and hours. I wanted to be like Rick Wakeman and Keith Emerson and Frank Zappa.
What was the cape implied, or was the cape actually?
Well, I couldn't afford a cape. Well, I might have had a cape actually. Yeah, I wrote a 47-minute prog song when I was 16, and I was really all in. And then taste kind of changed abruptly. In fact, in 1976, I got just rock music just seemed so bad, and even all my favorite bands at the time had put out bad records. I was really into Yes and ELP and Jethro Tull and the Beatles and the Stones, and all those bands had just by 76 had gotten bad, which was, cocaine had done its work, or whatever it was. And I went off and I went to study classical music. I just thought I gave up on rock music, and I went and saw a show with the Germs and the Deadbeats, nice. In 1977, summer of 77. And it was so incredible. And my focus shifted from these stadiums just to the local clubs where this amazing stuff was happening all over, the Western world. So at that time.
Yeah. And so were you finding things like in classical music and stuff that at the time that like just you weren't hearing in rock music, but then this kind of reignited the fire? Is that safe to say? Or
it's not that I had such a great love of classical music. I loved playing it, but I wasn't really a natural to classical music, and I wasn't a natural to jazz. I really was a prog rocker, so I was kind of in a dead end. Right. And I don't mind saying that. I was 16. You'd be amazed how many other of us early punks were into that. I know Keith Morris and Jack Grisham.
And Keith, yeah.
a lot of us were into that, and in a way, punk rock was kind of a logical extension of it, as far as just not trotting out the same old tired blues riffs and 3-chord progressions, and looking for something new and different,
Being musically adventurous and pushing it forward a little bit.
Yeah, and the Deadbeats, who a lot of people don't know about, was really one of those bands that was astonishing. They had odd meters, and they seemed almost like a Beefheart, Zappa influence, but unquestionably punk rock, So that let me know that there was a place. They were so forward looking, they didn't really even have to play a song. It was like what was going on in between the feedback and the bathrooms being trashed and the microphones, the beers being drank. All that stuff was part of the show. It was this theatrical thing that was really, really funny, and really, like, if they never would have gotten around to a song, it still would have been a great show. And so that
just a spectacle of the whole thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And the Pistols came out. We went up to Winterland, and that was kind of their dying breath. But John Lydon, the spirit of him, the way he turned around and started Public Image right away, was already alive in the Pistols. I think they were kind of a standard rock and roll band in a way, but his vision already, I think, was set on just tearing down things and building new ones. So
and R.I.P.
I was going to say the Screamers were just one of the greatest at, like, what can we do with these instruments that's never been done? And we take this Fender Rhodes and put it through a big muff and use that ARP Odyssey and don't have any guitars and basses. And, something emerged out of something that they had conceived that was very powerful.
Yeah. And it's something that was very unique too, even in a scene full of bands that were doing their own thing again. And something I bring up when I have people from that world a lot too, is that, it kind of seems like if you sounded like someone else, people would like kind of goof on you, like, whatever, which nowadays it's just like, oh, you're just doing a thing. You're doing a birthday party thing. You're doing a whatever, this thing, whatever. Okay, fine. And there certainly was nobody that sounded like Screamers at the time.
It's funny. I was thinking, I think the Screamers and Germs both set out to be like pop bands. And
right. Yeah. Their version of it. Yeah. Yeah.
And they put it all together and they went, we aren't. We never will be. This
is actually something else entirely. Yeah. Whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but did you feel, but the songs are like catchy and hooky, but how did it feel like playing the shows with that band though? Like with playing those shows with the Screamers?
Well, whenever you're on stage, whenever I'm on stage, there's a certain focus on, accuracy and the musical side of it.
Yeah.
So I was kind of the guitar player and bass player, in the sense that my left hand was the bass and my right hand was the guitar. And then the other keyboard player was doing all these sort of sounds and textures. So I kind of had my hands full.
Right.
And it was fast sometimes. So even though I had some chops, I'd been playing hard music. So a lot of that was focused on, accuracy. And also I sort of jumped in. We're already playing packed, sold out big shows. And I was 18 years old. So what did it feel like? Very focused, very concentrating, very not wanting to screw it up. And then gradually, the power of the synergy of what had been created sort of would carry us. I did a party about 2 weeks ago. It was KK's 70th birthday party, who is the drummer from the Screamers. And we did a little show in his basement, and we did for the party, and we did a lot of covers, and it was just fun. But at one point they wanted us to do Punisher Be Damned, one of the Screamer songs.
Yeah. Great song.
With just the two of us, and then a guy was singing. And it's so funny. You start playing those songs and it's instant. It's the easiest gig ever. You start playing them, you start the beat, you start the song, and the whole audience is just in the palm of your hands. And I don't think I've ever had that experience before since. I've always felt like I had to work for it, but something about, and maybe it's the passage of time and people's reverence for what it was accomplished in the past. But it's a funny feeling. It's sort of, in a way, it's kind of easy. You just you just start the song and you got them.
But it's also, I mean, I think of bands like that Detroit band Death, right? That were like basically completely unknown in their time until those recordings emerged, and then there's a documentary and whatnot, and all these people like discovered, oh, here's this great band that was around that nobody had any idea, and they touched a whole audience of people that weren't alive when they were around. I mean, I think that there's something kind of beautiful about that, and that's kind of like, I think the good part of the internet, if you will, and social media and whatnot, is having that kind of connection and avenues of discovery.
Yeah, it's a really different world, and there's so much music. I mean, I couldn't keep up with the music then because I was always so intent. I was playing in 2 or 3 or 4 bands at a time, and so I was so intent on learning and playing shows, and I missed so much stuff. I really come to terms with it just in the last few months. I always thought I was sort of some kind of expert. And I realized there's a different kind of expert, the kind of experts like someone like a Henry Rollins, who just is a student of all the music that's made, which I am not. And when you say Death, you could say almost any band you've ever listened to, and I would probably say, yeah, I've heard of them. I've never actually listened to them. It's a weird thing to confess.
Sure, especially if somebody records music too.
And it's hard to go backwards too, because if you didn't, some of this stuff, if you weren't exposed to it when you're 16 or 17 or 18 or early, it's hard to go back and listen to the Misfits now and go, oh, I get it, or the Ramones. And so I'm a huge fan of a lot of stuff that I was involved with, or that I was,
sure,
and it's like 45 Grave. 45 Grave is like the Screamers, man. I joined them. They needed a keyboard player. They didn't even really need me, but I happened to play with them when they were doing some of their big recordings, and I'm really proud of what I did. But I know at the time Christian Death was going on at the same time, and I completely missed Christian Death because I was all just 45 Grave all day long, so
just head down and doing the work and
a little bit. And so I'm like, I become a little humbled. Someone was talking about Lemmy, and I was like, I don't actually know much about Motorhead, to be honest with you, and it kind of makes sense because, like, I just told you what an effete classical prog rock,
yeah, right.
Like you hit me with straight
Topographic Oceans and Over the Top are definitely very different.
Yeah, you hit me with straight ahead rock and roll, and my friend was trying to turn me on to Lemmy, and he was playing all this stuff. And my wife made a video of my face, and I was sitting there, and my friend loved Lemmy, and I love this guy. I'm trying to be really polite, but the look on my face was so puzzled.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
well, and there's some things that if you don't have that context, that it doesn't necessarily work. Like, I mean, I'm certainly not going to name names, but there's a few bands I can think of that, like whatever I personally toured with, that were like, the show was amazing. And then you listen back to the records and it's like, well, all right.
That's happened to me recently too. Like Nick Cave, all those years, people would turn me on to Nick Cave, and I'd be like, it seems like it should be good, but I don't quite get it. It seems right up my alley, but nah. And then I saw him live, and I was like, oh, and it was like one of the best shows I've ever seen.
It connects. It connects. Yeah. And I think that's there's something to be said for that too. And as well as, there's almost like the world of making records and the world of playing live, and it's not the same thing, but they're both sets of skills. Some bands can do them both, and
I like to say it's only a coincidence that some people play live and make records. Pure coincidence.
So I guess that's a good pivot point as any to talk about, how did you get into recording, and how did you get into production and stuff like that?
Oh, way back then, there were these things called 4-tracks, and my 4-track tape recorders. You only could do 4 things at a time on them, but you could overdub and stuff. And so, from the time I was 18, anytime I could borrow, beg, or steal a 4-track, not steal, I never stole one, but anytime I could get one set up, I was making these, I guess, demos, and I just had to. A friend of mine, Pat Smear, who everybody I guess knows who Pat Smear is, called me the other day and he goes, those old 4-tracks that we made? Do you still have those? So the last 2 or 3 days, I was just in hell going through thousands of cassettes and reel-to-reel tapes trying to find the old stuff that we recorded way back then. So I was doing that starting in 78 and 79. And then, in the 90s, I was lucky. I got a series of 8-tracks, 4 in a row. 4 different 8-tracks, and I would play them until they would either take them back or they'd break. And so I was just 8-track all night long. And then finally, and I feel like my whole goal in life since I was 16 was to weasel my way into the situation I am in now, whereas I have my own recording studio. All I ever wanted.
Well, and it's and so then that's Kitten Robot, right? And that's the Kitten Robot empire started with the studio first. Correct.
Which is where we are right now. Sitting in the middle of it right now, yeah.
And
Empire. Well, yeah.
Well, you got the label too, so
yeah.
We can call it an empire. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to get too specific.
No, that sounds good.
And okay, so then what are the, like, when you're thinking about making records, when you think about like recording records, again, starting with the 4-track. I have one in the other room, by the way. The power source has been fried on it for maybe 25 years, but but I still can't let it go.
Can't throw them away. I know.
I won't get rid of it. It's like, no, keep that. Totally no reason. I'm probably not going to record on it again, but I'm not going to get rid of it. No way.
But what about accessing all those old recordings?
That is one very good reason to keep it around. Yeah, exactly.
It is. It's just a power supply.
So do you think that, I know what you think I would have picked up in the last 2 decades, but whatever.
The day you get rid of that machine will be the day someone calls you up and says, "Hey, you got those old?" So you got those don't do it.
I won't. Definitely not. So when you're thinking about record making, like making records, what kind of stuff were you originally thinking of? Because you mentioned like you're coming from the like Tales of the Topographic Oceans, Fragile, kind of like that prog world, right? But then you're also seeing this incredibly intense live presentation of these songs, of which I feel like it's to establish a baseline for folks that are the younger listeners here. Home recording is pretty easy now. And everybody can do it just on your phone or whatever, right? But like it was kind of an alchemy and a dark art for a lot of people for a long time, and just finding an engineer that wasn't like heavily ponytailed, I'm going to do a terrible job because I don't like music kind of thing was kind of a challenge.
The Screamers were lucky. They had Geza X, who was pretty darn good at it. He recorded some really good demos, which then the keyboard player made him erase, so that the only demos that people have heard have come off of cassettes. But I didn't get good at it, man. I was always so focused on the composition that the recordings I made weren't great. I'm a slow learner on some of this stuff. And it wasn't until I sat in a real recording studio starting around, I started having a lot of access to it around 2000. And I just sat in there, and it was Geza and Josie Cotton's studio in Malibu, Satellite Park. And they kind of threw me in there, and I gradually, learned, my ears just started like figuring stuff out very slowly. As far as what kind of records, since I'm working in a studio, a lot of it is just people who come in, and it's all over the map. And I've found people are always asking me, what about working on stuff you don't like? And it's not like that at all. It's about when you make music with people, it's this very intimate thing. And whatever people's tastes are, their heart has gone into it and their soul. And if you are open and present for the experience, And if you bond with the people, it becomes like, I kind of joined the band for a couple days while we're doing this stuff. And my job is to make it, to fulfill their vision as like beyond their dreams, sometimes with my own ideas, but sometimes just capturing their ideas in a setting and making it work. And that is an awesome job and responsibility. And I think it's broadened me a whole bunch. So if somebody had come, people, it's rare that by the end of it, that I haven't seen what they were going for and understood their influences and been able to make it into something that I at least have come to appreciate as well as them, So how lucky am I to be able to do that?
Well, and so it probably is going to make you a lot less judgmental too, because if you're someone's pouring their heart and soul into something, you want to see them succeed, and you want to try to find what is exciting them about it as well. I
think it's broadened me a lot. In a way, it's made me more judgmental because my job is all day long, like, okay, what's wrong with it and how can I make it better? And now when I listen to all these people that everybody else loves, I think the same thing. I've kind of been into this thing about stripping away mystique, because I make these records in here and I'm like, this is as good, in some ways, this is as good as their influences, and in some ways better. Now, granted, there's really something to be said for being the first to do it and to invent it. But, and the idea of stripping away mystique, now that's not right. It's something I've been experimenting with to try to, like, well, what if you listen to a Beatles record with none of the aura about it, or listen to the Sex Pistols or Public Enemy, get rid of the aura. Now, the thing is, truthfully, aura is possibly more important than anything. So,
the vibe,
looking
the
at,
feel.
So looking at Lemmy objectively and stripping away his aura, I mean, it's an interesting thought experiment, but it's not, it's something I've been playing with, but not necessarily that great an idea.
Well, and there's a talking about making records. There's a question from Sean Garrison from King Horse and Maurice in the chat about who insisted the Screamers not release a vinyl record. I mean, did it just not seem like a priority at the time? You mentioned you're making up for it ever since, but was it just not a priority? Was there
in 1978, the airwaves were so dominated by the Eagles and disco, and that's what it had to sound like. And Tomato, there was nobody that sounded even remotely. And I think the Screamers kind of rightfully, in a way, recognized that that if anything, it could work against them. And they were not going to be able to. Radio truly controlled the music industry. Right. So what you had was you had touring and you had radio, and that was how it worked. And then there was some TV shows like Ed Sullivan and Johnny Carson you could go on, and they would have never booked the Screamers. So the Screamers, I think, rightfully thought, we want to. And they were successfully, they brought in investors and they created a soundstage and a music studio, and they started working on a movie. And they started wanting to make rock videos before there was an MTV. All of that, I think, was really visionary and brilliant. I think that, so many things can go wrong when you're making a movie or when you're making videos. It's casting and editing and sound. There's so many things that can go wrong. And directing. And I think that everything went right, except I think that the person that they partnered with, they had every reason to believe in this guy. He had been working with Malcolm McLaren on the Who Killed Bambi movie. So
right. That post, yep.
So they had every reason to think this could work. But I think that collaboration, after every move they had made, had been golden and just like magical. That collaboration was not a fruitful collaboration. And over the course of that collaboration, they got investors, they started working on a movie, that director, and they I don't think they wanted to be a rock band, really. They really wanted to morph and mutate into a studio, which I think is hats off to them. Like, it's hard to imagine a band that good not wanting to keep doing it. I'll tell you, man, they never did the same show twice. It was like always, it was always like right around the time, like we were packing places and we were really starting just playing for thousands of people. They introduced violins and they introduced backing tracks and they introduced a theatrical performance that I thought was the beginning of the erosion of what I thought was the best of the band. But the secondary thing that was the best of the band was their visionary ambition and refusal to take the easy way out, the easy road. And, you know, sometimes when you're that fierce in your commitment to, you can finally hit the wall and make a wrong move. So that's, as an 18-year-old watching it happen, that's my take on it.
Well, a couple of things. So you mentioned theatrical. I mean, I think you got Tomato to Plenty involved. It's going to be a bit theatrical, I think, to be sure, right?
Yeah, but there was a minimalist theatricality that didn't require Broadway type of. When you started bringing in this Broadway vibe, there was some of their worst instincts in the Screamers was their tendency towards camp, I thought, and I was more towards the ferocious power that they would generate, and I was always pushing that way and the way I played. And if I was creating a set list, I wanted that sort of aggression. But they had the streak in them wanting to do I'm Going Steady with Twiggy. And when they hooked up with a director that indulged that sort of stuff, it kind of lost it for me.
Well, and it's wild too that for the longest time, the only real documentation of the band was a Target video, right? It was that one concert from what was it, like 78 or something, right?
Which for me and was my favorite era, really. You know?
Yeah. And the idea of kind of doing it a different way, certainly, like I think the ethos is holds true throughout the whole band. Was there any, like, were the residents in the picture at all, as far as like thinking about ways the bands have done it in an interesting manner? Or like, was there any, I guess I should say, were there any other bands or acts at the time that were looked upon as like fellow travelers, or was it just Screamers land all the time?
No, it was really like us against the world, and the Screamers didn't want to be associated with anyone. And that's why they didn't do Decline of Western Civilization. They didn't want to be associated with anyone. Their influences were business management books and French philosophy, definitely. Right. You know, so
well, yeah. What was that theater of the spectacle of who?
Artaud, Artaud, Anton Artaud, stuff like that. I, being a kid, I've been influenced by classical music. I was just starting to learn about Jimi Hendrix and Bob Dylan. And and part of me was part of my punk attitude was hey, what is with this Bob Dylan guy? I was exploring stuff that I was finding really good stuff that had come before, but maybe part of that is that I really did have part of me rooted in the previous generation, so it took me like 8 years to appreciate The Cure, and then when when Bright Eyes and Elliott Smith came along, boom, I was like singer-songwriters. It's just so weird, the stuff that will hit you, and then the stuff that'll go in when I recorded a band called Prissy Whip that everybody should look up and listen to.
Yeah, Prissy Whip is great, man. That's a great band.
I saw them live and I was like amazed, but before I recorded them, but I'll tell you, I probably couldn't have truly become the Prissy Whip fan I am without sitting in the room and being a part of the process, and same with Chaton de Mon Quartet, which I did for a while, which is a band with Chaton and Rick Agnew and Deb Venom, which was actually, we did a Screamers cover. There was something screamerish and punk techno about it and if I would have just walked into that club into a club somewhere and seen us, I don't know if I would have got it, man. I'm slow and I have a lot of stuff in. I gotta get in there and get involved sometimes, to really, I think I was working with an artist named Mark Curry, who was a singer-songwriter who got a deal on Virgin. And that was really got me into the singer-songwriter thing. Like, dude, this guy just has an acoustic guitar and it's all he needs. That's that is all he needs. Like, you want to talk about stripped down and getting direct. So I really like lyrics, and stuff like that. So,
did you? What era of Prissy Whip was that with Michael singing, or was that later on with the?
It was with Heather. It was with Heather actually, who had.
Sorry.
I had recorded her band Egrets on Ergot, and then which was a weird experience. Like for 6 hours, I was in the studio with them, going, man, I just can't make this work. It's like, it's kind of tribal drums, who's, nobody can play very well, and the guy's screaming, and I don't get it. This guitar player, she doesn't know a chord from a note. I mean, and then 6 hours into it, I just went, this is perfect.
It all connected. Yeah.
This band's incredible. I don't, so that was a weird experience. And then after that, I worked with her on a solo record that eventually came out under the name Crow Jane.
Oh, right. I forgot about that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which we worked on that for years, and I didn't think it was ever going to come out, or we just Bandcamp it or something. And then Kitten Robot started, and it was going to be just a label for Josie's stuff. And then we kind of, because Josie Cotton got ownership of her original recordings from the 80s. And so we wanted to reissue that stuff. And then we thought, well, that seems kind of a little like weird just to have her on this label, nobody else. Is Paul, you got anybody you've recorded in there that might be good? So I sent him the Heather record, which I was so close to my heart, but I thought might be a little bit too avant-garde for the label. But they liked it and they put it out, and we got really good response from that record.
Another record you put out was Kira's record, who has also been on the show, the great Kira Roessler, your sister.
Also, I've been working with her, especially, I mean, always through our whole life, but making these recordings since the 90s. And I asked her once, well, do you ever want to put it out? I feel like a lot of people would be interested in this stuff. And she looked at me with this like angry look and said, why would I want to do that? And I was like, whoa, like, I mean, just like, wow.
How
so
Kira,
yeah. So Kira, like, damn. So I tried again when we had the label. I go, we have this label now, and we could do, and she could, there's a lot of labels that would put her stuff out,
Sure, of course. Yeah.
But she had a vision around like of the, dozens and dozens of songs that we've recorded. She had a vision of 10 or 12 that fit together in one story, and she was willing to do that. So, and then we've done a couple shows too, which is,
I've seen that on the internet. Yeah.
Just about. So the hardest music ever, because, she writes all her songs with two bass lines, interlocking, very ornate, difficult, angular bass lines, kind of like Dose, her band with Mike Watt.
Yeah. Very interlocking. It's all interlocking on that band. Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'll just play piano, and how hard can it be? And then I realized, fuck, I've got to learn I've got to learn what she did exactly, right. Or it's not, I'm copping out, I'm like taking the easy way out. And so I had to like learn that shit. And so I don't think I'll ever do a show with her without pieces of paper telling me what's going on,
like
because
notes and all that. Yeah.
It's just so, but on the other hand, I'm so glad I did that, because when I do that, it's really, I'm playing the low notes on the piano. It's like Dose, but it is different. And we have full drummer really hitting, and it's a really special, unique thing. So I love that. I love doing that. And then, Jeton Demone Quartet was completely opposite. I don't think I ever had a rehearsal with them. They asked me to jump up on stage with them one day, and I was like, I don't know your songs. I don't have time. I don't have time to rehearse. And they said, don't worry, it's free form and you're going to be able to do it. And I was like, okay. And the first time I did it with them, it was a little bit like that feeling of the Screamers and a few bands I played in. Nina Hagen, when Nina Hagen opens her mouth when she's in full voice and just goes, oh, and like the hair on the back of your neck, just like the walls sweat, like you stand in front of Bad Brains in 1980, 1979. You're just like, oh my God, like the world is coming to an end,
Do you remember Maxell? They had the guy in the chair with
that
going
exactly.
Back.
So that happened with Chatan and Rick, and then eventually we weren't just doing freeform stuff, but I was always given a lot of freedom to just to really like play like classical music or whatever behind, Rick Agnew's doing Rick Agnew, and so and eventually we did an album called Substrata Strip that I think I'm really, as far as in the studio, where this crazy thing that happened live, there's a mutated version of it that happened in the studio that stands on its own. It doesn't necessarily show you what happened live, but it's, studio magic is just a whole other animal,
Absolutely. So there's a few things I definitely want to get to with that. Before that, Nick Six, Dazzling Killman, former guest of the show, very recent former guest of the show, mentioned, this is a comment. I'll put this up here. I don't have questions for Paul, but years ago I got DC3 a place to crash after their show in St. Louis.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nick.
I got drunk and woke up to Paul playing a beautiful piece from West Side Story on a piece on a piano in this basement, which is
West Side Story. Maybe. I don't know if I know anything for West Side Story, but it could have been
a sound like situation, but
yeah.
And that's fantastic. So which brings up a great point. The DC3, so Dez from Black Flag, Kira was playing with Dez and left to join Black Flag, and then you jumped in and joined DC3, right? Am I getting the chronology of that correctly?
Yeah, they actually, I don't think they played any shows. They just had a couple rehearsals, and I was I did keyboard bass for the first album, which was I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I could do it better now. I might be able to do it better now. At the time, I was like winging it, because he was doing a sort of a punk Hawkwind thing that would have benefited from nice real bass, but it was also, again, it was a unique thing and it was kind of cool. And then eventually we got a bass player and I switched over to more traditional keys.
Do you find that doing like that bass keyboard stuff again, because you mentioned earlier about doing like, again, being the bassist and the guitar player, and for those that are only listening, I have both hands up to show that there's different parts of the keyboard that you're playing. Did you find it more limited, or did you find that kind of like, oh, that's gonna be kind of freeing in a way that you're only thinking about like that lower register?
It was just super challenging. It was just really challenging. I mean, a bass does a visceral physical thing, and it doesn't matter what the right notes are. I mean, it matters. I just had to make the low end like punch like a bass player would, and it was just fucking hard, man. It was hard to do. I mean, I think I did it, but in a and the Screamers too. KK always said my kick drum is the bass and my floor tom is the bass, so I'm not totally in that low end, but all these things are interesting to talk about. It's the kind of musical challenges that the musicians listening understand. It's like every project you do, there's different challenges to making it special,
fitting it in and finding the things in it that work and that do the thing you want to do and that everyone else hopefully wants it to do as well.
And it's hard to put into words sometimes, but to do that thing we do.
Exactly. Do you? Oh, by the way, apparently it was from sheet music, is what Nick was saying in the chat. So it was.
Oh, that's okay. That's possible. Yeah.
Very, very important follow up to a very, very important comment from earlier.
Yeah.
So I want to get to. So before we move on too much, I do want to talk about Nina Hagen a little bit. But let's. Can we just Can we talk about Nervous Gender a little bit? I think Nervous Gender is interesting as well. I mean, it's certainly spectacle wise / there's certainly
I mean, I walked into a club and they were almost like the Germs in the sense that, you know, they were playing the keyboards as if they were guitars, and there was modulations, and it was just such fucked up chaos. It was just so wrong, and it was so terrible that it was incredible.
That was great. Yeah.
And I was watching it just like going, oh my God. And the passion was there. And, but I think I did a back flip off the stage, you know, and, broke my toe. I might have done some MDMA or something that night. I don't do any of those things anymore, but, and I just, you know, were going through some lineup changes, and I'm like, hey, I'm in if you want me to do it. And, what I was trying to do, I had a metal street sign and a piano pickup that I hooked up to a pickup, and I ran the pickup through effects, and I was like rolling dice and using it as a drum, and you know, doing weird stuff on that, which, you know, Nervous Gender is another band that some part of them wanted to be you know, the Monkees. They all wanted.
It turned out different. Yeah.
You know, despite the fact that they're saying the most horrible, you know, sacrilegious lyrics, they still think somewhere that there's a place for them in the top 40.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, they got an 8-year-old drummer, and by an 8-year-old drummer, I don't mean an 8-year-old drummer like, wow, amazing, a prodigy. No, he was an 8-year-old drummer, just hitting stuff.
Just an 8-year-old, huh?
Yeah. and but it was really about God, you know, they were pushing so many boundaries, and they were probably pushing some boundaries that they shouldn't have been pushing as well. Just leave that boundary alone. But
like the boundaries of good taste, perhaps.
Well, more the boundaries of like personal behavior that could possibly be dangerous and questionable, you know. So I mean, we were all like young. I mean, I was 20, but it was like I said, I was kind of the piano room nerd, you know, and some of that stuff became like shocking, was always shocking to me. You know, I tried to play it off and be a sophisticated person, but I was kind of, part of me is naive to this day. Whatever I've been through, that you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, which I've decided was all sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was all a big mistake. Sex, drugs, and roll. It was a dead end and a wrong turn. When people tell me they make excuses for their behavior, and they expound the philosophy. Yeah, but dude, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, that no longer flies for me anymore. That's, you know, so if your philosophy is sex, drugs, and rock and roll now, I'm just putting it on the table that you could really question, is that really a philosophy truly? Sorry, I know that I'm an old guy.
No, it's there's that whole fascination and obsession with like the freeing of the id, right? Like the music as like catharsis, and then like,
yes, absolutely. It's a young man's game, and you know, if you didn't go through it as a young person, you probably don't have any soul or spirit. So, but you know, I hope you survive, and I hope you come out the other side with that what is it called?
Perspective.
What do they call when they turn gold into lead into gold?
Alchemy.
Yeah, I hope you have alchemically turned that hedonistic behavior into something like a power that is of value to you, because I've had so many people that didn't survive it. But hey, it's a good story as it's going down.
As long as you survive it, yeah, that's the key factor.
Yeah, or not. Leave a good-looking corpse.
Yeah, that was certainly some of them did.
Which actually is a segue, like, because I really do want to talk to, and I will talk about Nina Hagen. I don't know what our time constraints are.
We got time, man. There's a long form show, but yeah, because I was going to mention, because after Nervous Gender, after the LP came out, that's when you moved to New York, right, to play with Nina.
With Nina, yeah. And yes, I think that's
exactly, we don't have to keep it strictly sequentially. It's okay to jump around.
It's something fun. Like that. I did move to New York. She came to LA. Yes, in fact, I know I was rehearsing with Nervous Gender because Nina put out the word on Rodney Bingenheimer's show that she was looking for Paul Screamer. A friend of mine had hung out with her one night at a club and said she was looking for an American band. And she said, "You've got to get Paul Screamer. He's the man for you." And that's how Nina works. She doesn't audition people. She goes from her gut. And so I had the gig. And I mean, so she came over to my house and I'd been having a Nervous Gender, which was like a 2-bedroom, very dingy apartment. In the living room was Nervous Gender rehearsal, which was just synthesizers, floor to ceiling, everywhere. It just looked like I was, I had all their stuff set up there. And so she looks around and she's like, "This is the guy." And so she flew me to me and Helen, my wife, to New York, and we rehearsed there for 3 months, and then did toured Europe, which was actually a really huge change for me because Nina Hagen was really a rock star.
Yeah, she was big, legit big.
So as big as the Screamers were, by the end of it, where we could have probably drawn a couple thousand people at the end, I was starting to get a feeling for that. Nina was playing 5,000 and 6,000 seat places every single night, and there was it was a leap. There was bodyguards, and there was touring with her manager was Frank Zappa's manager, so we were touring with Frank Zappa's sound system and his road crew. Excuse me. And it was a real change, and in a way it felt really uncomfortable for me because I was really coming out of this skepticism of what that sort of level of success does to a person and to an artist, and I got to see it firsthand because it's what I like to call a mind fuck,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, of course. I mean, it's like being in a different world. I would imagine. Right.
You don't touch your equipment. You walk on stage and it's all set up in this big place. And you stay at a nice hotel and you ride a tour bus, and you're not moving gear, and and look, it's good, and it's just sort of inevitable. I'm actually just saying that I was uncomfortable with it. I did things like I would travel sometimes with the truck driver. I made friends with the guy driving the truck and toured with the truck. I just did stuff because I just felt uncomfortable, and
because it's a different level. Like, it's not relatable in the way that we're thinking of music at the time, right? I mean,
and I was questioning. I didn't automatically take to it, which I think is interesting because most people, they'd be like, "Well, thank God, and this is it," and
finally,
it was just weird. It was I mean, I wrote a couple songs for her, and they were songs that I wrote in 5 minutes, and then she would kind of wail over the top of it, and I was so used to craft, and so there was on the other hand, I was in the presence of a talent that was so Teutonic and so elemental, elemental. I mean, a person, I've met very few people in my life like her, and what you see with her is what you get. And it's not like she shuts that off. That obviously, she's like that at all times. And over the course of her career, she's burned her career to the ground and then built it back up and had, just no fear. And she's made terrible mistakes and brilliant, decisions. And just a one of a kind artist, one of a kind.
Well, I mean, to be that bold and to be that, apparently fearless from the outside perspective as an artist, that's.
Well, she got a record deal with CBS. Okay, we're going to break the German rock star in America. And they hired a producer who had produced Soft Cell, Mike Thorne, and they got the best session musicians in New York. And she made Nunsex Monk Rock,
Right. Fantastic. Yeah.
An immovable force and an unmovable object and irresistible force.
Irresistible force and
she could not be controlled. And people to this day go, that's an incredible record. But I don't think it's the record CBS was planning for.
We'll charitably say probably not.
Probably.
and then but at some point you kind of you get Pat to play too. You get Pat Smear from Germs to
I did, which was kind of the end of it for me, because we flew out to New York for the next tour, which was going to be Rio de Janeiro and not the next big thing. And Pat was not the kind of guitarist they wanted. The guy, like, her management wanted the guy that could, like, plug in his guitar. We would audition these guys. They're always the same thing. They plug in the guitar and they bust out some Guitar Center licks, right, and you go,
right.
Oh yeah, that guy. And Pat's not the guy. Pat will plug in his guitar and sit there quietly. And then, what Pat does is he, like, finds the part of the song. He finds a guitar part that when the song is done, you're humming the guitar part that he came up with.
Yeah.
He's like another incredible one of a kind talent that is very hard to put your finger on what his talent is. I did a whole album with him, Ruth and Smear. There was just the two of us. We made home 4 tracks, and then we went into the studio an 8-track with Ethan at Radio Tokyo and recorded another version of it. And his influences are Beatles and Queen and Yes and Darby Crash, whatever. Right. So his talent is, but his clearly he can play in the biggest bands in the world, so he's a most valuable player. But they didn't see it at the time because he wouldn't plug in and do guitar player with, and they fired him. And I just was like, I just felt that discomfort I felt for the 3 years I was playing with her sort of came to a head, and I was just like, this is just not right for me. I would rather be playing with Nervous Gender and Twisted Roots and 45 Grave and SST. I want to get back to the LA scene and do that. And so I walked away from that, and I played with Nina again starting in 98 for quite some time, for like 10 or 12 years. So I was happy to be reunited with her, but at the time, and sometimes I regretted it. My life would have been much easier. I could have, played rock star probably.
If you just stuck with her and just kind of,
I probably could have been much easier, but I wouldn't have been able to do, the SST scene. I would have missed a lot of stuff, and I had 2 kids, so yeah.
So a few things there. First of all, I think that that's probably one of the most accurate summations of Pat Smear's guitar playing I think I've ever heard, because again, even all the way back to the Germs, like, you wouldn't necessarily, especially when they started, you wouldn't be like stellar musicianship would not be like on your checkbox, but there was something so deeply compelling about that later turned into like, oh, these are hooky songs. These are songs that like,
his right hand, if you're a guitar player, there's a couple right hands. One of the best right hands I ever saw, I saw Keith Richards play once with his own band. And I saw a 3-hour sound check and a 3-hour show, and his right hand was within, 3 or 4 samples for 6 hours. His feel for every song was every style, funk, reggae, Chuck Berry, Stone songs. His feel was flawless. And Pat's right hand just makes you go, it just always feels so good. And not just, downstroke Germs music. He can do a lot of different stuff. So
John Reese is another one. Rock from the Crypt, Hot Snakes. He's another one that's like, oh man, that's you want to start work out your wrists.
It makes your music feel so good, Yeah.
Another, you mentioned Twisted Roots. That and that band, of course, started right at the era of kind of when stuff was starting to get like more violent. I mean, not counting the Police, of course, who were plenty violent to begin with. How was that band received, especially by you had skinheads and stuff coming in? You had like clashes of culture as far as that goes.
Oh, it's funny, it's funny. Like, I actually. Somebody just got I was just snarky with someone in social media about this. So like, I did get really violent, didn't it? But like, I didn't go in the pit,
Right. No problem.
I mean, it's like what it really got was it got a lot bigger. and not only like bigger, like instead of 100 people or 50 people, there was like 500 people, and the audience, since you had 500 people, the biggest guys were in the middle. I'm sure there was horrible, terrible people there, but I mean, when people went from being a bunch of 120-pound artists to 220-pound, ex-football players or surfers, like everybody calls them jocks. I mean, they might not have been jocks. They might have been surfers or something like that. So I know I'm supposed to say how the big Orange County people ruin the scene, but I kind of don't actually feel that way. And so when we started Twisted Roots, those are the people that liked us. And the critics that had thought that the Germs and the Screamers were such brilliant artistic accomplishments didn't get us at all. And we actually were doing something that I know was challenging to their sensibilities. And what we were doing was, our friend, who was my and Pat's best friend in high school and at various times, had committed suicide, and some of our other friends were having a really hard time, and we started to question the self-destructive side of punk rock. We weren't questioning punk rock, but I think that even though, and I'm kind of proud that we did have this vision, Pat and I and Kira and Maggie, we had this vision that there had to be a way for punk rock not to be a suicide note and a commitment to a life of heroin abuse and homelessness and brain damage, and not to say we weren't still having plenty of, but the idea of to somehow, and David Foster Wallace talks about this in some essays, the idea of not embracing cynicism and the cool sarcasm, it's a very fine line, because when you do that, you're in danger of being sentimental and very cheesy and very uncool. And so Twisted Roots, we were like, we were sort of had our sights set on like this sort of happy and hopeful thing, but informed by death and addiction, that we had seen. So I don't think the people in Hollywood, the Hollywood people, didn't get that at all. But damned if we didn't have a bunch of those big Orange County people slamming in the front when we would play down there.
Yeah.
And the people in LA were a little bit like, wait, well, this doesn't sound like the Screamers, and there's no kamikaze death trip here. This is are they selling out? Well, I mean, you listen to that band, it's not very polished.
I was gonna say it wouldn't be the band that I would accuse you of selling out on, for sure. I mean, I love it, but it's not like
that sellouting part of Twisted Roots came later, when my singer quit, and rather than just going, okay, that's a moment in time, and that was Twisted Roots, I tried to keep doing Twisted Roots with other singers, which was like probably just stupid. Well, I was very insightful in some areas of my life, but there's some areas of my life I didn't get it.
Didn't
so
land.
I get it now. It would start a new band. Don't try to but I wasn't good at coming up with band names. I was just too lazy to think of a new one was a big part of it.
To be fair, coming up with band names is terrible. And it's even worse now.
Worse now. That's why I go by Paul Roessler. If you search it, you'll either get me, or like there's a couple, they think there's a molecular biologist somewhere, and it's easy to tell us apart.
Right, you're not going to get confused with it. What was your first exposure to Dead Kennedys? Was it the In God We Trust? Did you hear that first? Did you see them, or would you play with them? Like, what was the?
Well, wasn't Fresh Fruit before that? Fresh Fruit was the first group. So the first thing I remember, what the first thing they did a single with Geza that was California Uber Alles and Holiday.
It was the same. It was California Uber Alles. Yes. You're right.
And
Yeah.
it was great.
It's terrible. I was supposed to have East Bay Ray and Klaus Fluoride on earlier this month, but of course with the passing of Dage Pellegro, we were going to do that in December sometime. But obviously, I need to bone up a little bit if I'm getting the chronology wrong. But
yeah, they did.
So
that
it was the first thing. It was my first goal. Yeah,
they did that, and so I heard about them then. And we were going up to San Francisco with the Screamers quite a bit. We're going up almost every month and playing with Bouet, and we went up a few times. So they were around, but they weren't in the very first wave. But I remember Jello's in the audience in that Target video, so he was there.
Yeah.
And then so I was really close friends with Geza, and I think Jello asked Geza for my number to play on Fresh Fruit, and he was probably thinking, if I get a Screamer on there, that'll give me some sort of, or maybe he was just tipping his hat to a band that he really loved. But so I flew up there, and he even paid me $100, and I played on a couple songs, and they didn't need me, although playing Stealing People's Mail, it was interesting working with Joe. He had a very specific idea of what he wanted, and it was, again, it's very fast and hard to play. So yeah, and then I jumped up on stage with him a few times. The first time I think I'd been up there doing the record, so I kind of was a little bit rehearsed, and we did a show up there, and that was recorded, and it's on that Dangerous Minds blog. There's actually a recording of
I was going to say it's Dangerous
Minds. I was dreading that. I was like,
I heard
my God.
that. It's crazy. The song. Oh God.
Well, I jumped.
It like sounds completely different.
Well, I play on like 6 songs, and I actually know how the songs go, and which I didn't remember because they came to LA later and said, "Hey, do you want to jump up and play?" And I did it, and I really didn't. I really didn't know the songs, and I was making like noise over the top, but I was just making kind of feedback noise. It was kind of cool in its own way, but the Dangerous Minds, I actually did know the song, so we must have rehearsed. But yeah,
I just remember, if I remember, there's one of the songs I want to say is, I think it's Too Drunk to Fuck, where it almost has like a 60s horror movie sound or something to it, or something along those lines. It's really cool. It's pretty.
Yeah, Too Drunk to Fuck. I'm playing this distorted, super fast thing, and then there's another song called "Drug Me," where I think we took a grand piano and ran it through distortion, and it's like, but yeah, great band. I recorded some stuff with DH 3 or 4 years ago, and they contacted me about having Ray play on it and finishing it up. It's like it's a couple covers. But yeah, that was sad. Yeah,
it's such a shock, man. It happens, but it's shocking. It's just a total shocker. But did you hear they did that remix of Fresh Fruit? Have you heard that?
Yeah. Oh God, I should listen to that. I should check it out. No.
Oh, he said, Sean Garrison again. Says Police Truck is the one I'm thinking of, where it sounds like horror movie music. So okay,
I don't think that's me. I'm only on a couple songs on that album.
Yeah, I think that. Well, I do remember the Dangerous Minds thing, because it was interesting to hear that band live with keyboards, because already was pretty full sounding. Like it was sort of like there was already not between all of them, great players. There wasn't a whole lot of space to work with.
Dude, it's fucking fast. Back then, back then I had my chops. Like MIDI has ruined me. Now I can fix wrong notes and but back then you actually had to do it.
Well, yeah. So they did reissue Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables, and it was
the remix by was it Chris Lord Algae?
That's right. Which is not the first person I would think of to do that. They could have called you, man.
I think it's interesting because you've had these remixes, you've had these versions, and he's going to do something. He's going to bring a certain skill set to the table. It's always interesting to hear what these clashes, because in a way it is a clash.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I understand the idea of kind of bringing something out that maybe you wanted to hear more or coming back to it. But it's also like once it's out in the world. People already. No, I mean, not that they're pulling like a Star Wars, like George Lucas putting in CGI extra characters and and Han shooting first or anything, but it is a little bit of revising, like a punk rock history.
I mean, I don't.
Or is
I
it?
just,
I don't know. Maybe that's
no, I don't really see it that way. I see it as like remixes are like sort of a time-honored tradition by now, and a lot of times it's in the hip hop world. And so you have a guy, so a mixer. There's very interesting mixers' ears. They're sort of like rabbits, and they have these preternatural skills. And it's like, you could hear it and just go, "Oh no, that's just terrible," or you could hear it and you go, "That's interesting," or you could hear it and go, "That's amazing." And I think a record that's 45 years old that we've all heard a million times, like they should let like Jacob Collier or like some hip hop guy remix it, or
go even. Oh, I see what you're saying. So go even like crazier. Like go like
yeah. I mean, I'm just really open. It's like, if it's bad, I think this is also remixes. I think a lot of people hear those remixes and they'll say, doesn't sound that different. And the people it sounds different to as musicians, and a lot of people will be like,
yeah,
so
yeah,
what's the big deal,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not precious about this stuff, and I'm not a purist. And like I said, if it sucks, it sucks.
When did you originally hook up with Mike Watt? There was I know you played with him in the Second Men.
When D Boon first died, he wasn't really playing with anybody, and Kira reached out to him, and they started doing Dose. And at the same time, I think she said, "Why don't you play with Paul?" And me and him did a band called Criminy.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I don't think he'd even started Fire Hose yet. I think he was still just like, I mean, that was such a devastating blow, and and I was just writing a lot of songs. It was weird because I write these piano songs, and Watt would go, "Okay, that's good," But I later came to understand Mike's musical sense about his way of arranging stuff, and I think he wanted to play with me because he'd never played with a keyboard before, and the piano. It's such a odd, and so I would just kind of play the songs like I was Elton John or something. And he would play. So I kind of missed, there's a couple times where we went, okay, let's try to integrate the piano and the bass and create something. But it really wasn't like that. It was like, I mean, he would write a very complex and interesting bass thing behind this Elton Johnny piano thing. And so I feel like I kind of missed, I feel like there was a little bit of a missed opportunity for that,
Right.
And I also think it's kind of one of the worst periods of songwriting. I didn't really feel good about my songwriting till the 90s, to be honest with you. So
really?
I think I had to do, I say this about a lot of artists. There's an artist I really admire named Jacob Collier, who's one of the greatest geniuses alive, but a heroin habit would really help him, because there's just not enough suffering there.
Oh, man.
He's more skill and talent than any human being on earth, but no mental illness whatsoever. There's not
gotcha.
And we love mental illness and make such good art. So by the 90s, I was able to really tap into the mental illness, and I started, and I documented it all. And I put it on Bandcamp. It took me a long time. It took me decades, but I finally put it all up under, it's 4 parts. It's 4 double albums, and it's called The Drug Years. Kind of, a large work. But when I was playing with Mike, I had 2 babies, and I was, not like my life was comfortable. I mean, we were super poor, but I was young, and I had these children, and it was very, that what I was talking about Twisted Roots, about willing to be positive positive thinking, which can tip over into sentimentality. I think a lot of the songs I was working with Mike Watt, I was continuously tipping over into sentimentality by that point. So anyway, later on I got to play with him again. He had me play on his what's that? The Ball Hogger Tugboat, which was masterful. And then he called me to fill in a couple times for Pete Mazich when Pete couldn't make the tours. So I'd have to jump in, and dude, that was degree of difficulty.
Yeah.
You know, trying, like, we would rehearse and then he'd go away on tour for 6 weeks. And then I'd come for the last 2 weeks after not having practiced with him for 6 weeks and try to pull it off. And if I messed anything up, Watt would start screaming at me on stage. And even if I wouldn't mess things up, he would also scream at me on stage sometimes. Like if he would mess things up, he would scream at me on stage. And you know, I don't think I'm being too controversial. I think the people who've played with Mike know this side of his personality. And you know what? Thelonious Monk was the same way.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to sit here and say it was sometimes hard to play with Mike, it was an honor to play with Mike. And I would say that Mike Watt is probably one of the most underrated artists alive.
Yeah.
And like, I know he is revered, but nobody ever talks about his Hoot page. And on Mike Watt's Hoot page, you will find his tour diaries for the last 45 years, written in some strange form of English. And
you're leaning.
I think it's Proustian. It's like Finnegan's Wake or Remembrance of Things Past. I think it's it's the greatest literary achievement to come out of punk rock, and it's a million words. I don't know how many words, and so
and he's never stopped doing it. I mean, he continues to do it to this day. It's great. I mean, it's incredible.
It's incredible, and so he always had that in him from the earliest days of the Minutemen. He was a true literary person, and writers write. You know, you don't like, hey, I wrote a book, and there's my book, No, you write. If you're a writer, you write every day, and eventually you start to figure out some stuff. And Mike Watt wrote every day and figured out some stuff. And man, so I always like to, because I want to be allowed to complain about what a fucking creep he was yelling at me on stage sometimes.
You can also give him some props too. Yeah, everybody, it's like a little bit of the sweet and a little bit of the sass. Yeah,
but I love that guy, and I hopefully I have honored him in a sense beyond, great. Maybe he's on the cover of Bass Player magazine. Right. Good for him, and he's played with Iggy Pop, and he's in the Minutemen. Can we consider the possibility that he might be, before our eyes that none of us are seeing, one of the great literary giants of our generation? That let's just put it out there. I don't know. So he sure has written a big thing.
It's been a couple of years now, but it's a rare distinction. I've been on his show, which is obviously an honor, but he's been on this show as well. And I got a lot of props from folks that were like, well, you really kept him on track with all the stories. And I was like, yeah, it was work, because it's, his brain's going a mile a minute. He's got a million things to talk about. He's going this way, he's going that way. But it was absolutely worthwhile, because I mean, what an incredible life he's lived, what an incredible career in music. But I mean, what an incredible motor mouth too. And that's coming from me.
He invented his own language.
Not everyone can do that, right? He's actually coming on again in December, which I'm very excited for. It's been a long time since.
Well, you tell him how I just praise the Hoot page.
I will, and that's a great point, because now, so the idea of being able to have something like that on the internet now, of course, everyone's doing it on Facebook and like Twitter and whatever, but like the idea of seeing those experiences put forward in a way that like someone like a younger person could like look at that and kind of get a window into like what touring is like, or at least what touring is like if you're Mike Watt, and see that. I mean, I consider that a formative experience. Like it was pretty much like him and Rose from the Poster Children and Michael Dahlquist from Silkworm, but like there were so few people doing that, and it was like a message in a bottle to a certain degree, right? But for the kind of person that it's for, that's like was so interested, and without a show like this to have people be able to like find out more about it, that was the window into the world, and it continues to be so for people that. Still, yes. Oh my God, he still does it in the comments. Yeah. Of course he does. It's Mike Watt. Of course he's gonna keep doing it, man. Come on, yeah.
Yeah,
But
he made all of us do it. Actually, and which is also really interesting. He makes all the guys in the band do it. So you get that 3 perspective or 4 perspective. I mean,
the Rashomon effect, right? Like
it's more. It's a work of art that could never be grasped. It could never be grasped by a person. You could study it your whole life, and not only his writing, but the context of the other people in his band. I mean, what a monumental work that is. It's really amazing.
And the commitment to doing it as well, which I think is pretty fantastic. So you touched briefly upon the 4-part the drug years, the ones you have the paintings for all that. I think that's interesting because you have did you do the paintings yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, so where did the paintings come? Like, how did the art fit with the admittedly somewhat heavy material?
I mean, it's just pop songs, really. It's the songs are Elton Johnny, but informed by drugs.
Elton Johnny is your new favorite descriptor, by the way. I love that.
When you're a piano player, you have to remember about Elton John. He had a lyricist that was writing some pretty fucking,
yeah.
I mean, there's Elton John with his glitter and his jumping around, and he's a great singer and a great piano player, and the whole image of it. But if you actually look at what Bernie Taupin was doing, there's something much more serious. And kind of when it was happening at the time, I was sort of focused on, there was some darker things going on, and you didn't really have punk rock. So I think it's kind of a legitimate thing. And if you're a piano player, writing songs with melodies, and then granted, I was also, it gets a little bit gnarlier than that, but some of that is sprinkled in there. But what was the question? You were asking about asking about the paintings.
Yeah.
So I had my stuff set up in my garage, which was my wife at the time was named Helen, and she was a kleptomaniac, and so she was she was a compulsive thief, and so the garage was like this crazy, like weird tweaker palace, and I had my stuff set up there, and sometimes while I was working, I kept asking her to do paintings for me from the images that were coming into my head, and then I was like, I'm going to see if I can do it. And I read a book called Drawing with the Right Side of Your Brain, which was really helpful about just draw what you see, not what you think, and stuff like that. Really simple. And so I started playing with the acrylics, and I did it for like a year or two, but then I thought, fuck, I'm a musician and I'm never going to master music, and I could spend my whole life working on music and never master it. And this is, I felt like I had a few successes in the painting that I was happy with, but I wanted to get back to put 100% into the music, so I stopped doing that. But I thought that those paintings actually captured the time. It was a really dark. I was a construction worker, handyman, painting people's houses, and doing remodels on Sears and stuff like that. Just and really unhappy because I felt like my musical career had slipped away, and then I would do music all night every night and sleep for 3 or 4 hours, and then go back and do it, and coach the kids' basketball team and help them with their homework and read them books before bed. And I read them a lot over those 8 years. I read them Mark Twain, and I read them The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and I read them every night, and it adds up. And made sure that tried to keep it together as well as I could, but I didn't really care about playing. I just was dedicated to writing and composing, and I would still get gigs. And during that time, I played with Lee Andrioni, and I got to play on Conan O'Brien, and I got to play on
the other Conan. Right.
Yeah, Madison Square Garden. And I had some I would get sometimes these calls to do. I toured with the Joy Killer. I would have some good things happen, but really I was really focused on just writing that music, and because I had those 8 tracks,
Yeah.
And then when that was over and I got sober, people gave me real recording studios. Funny how that works, isn't it? And they gave me real recording studios, and they said, hey, here's this recording studio, and if nobody's in there, go ahead and do what you want. So I took a lot of those home recordings and started trying to make them sound better. Sometimes I could improve them. Sometimes I would ruin them and just have to go with the original demos. And sometimes I'd re-record them completely, and that was the right thing. And I did it and did it and did it for like 20 years. And finally I was just like, it still wasn't perfect because it's 65 fucking songs and 5 hours of music. And it was like, I'm never going to, and I'm trying to out demo the demo. So finally I was just like, COVID happened. I was like, I'm going to set a deadline, for January 1st, 2021. And I'm going to say it's done. And whatever state it's in at that point. I've been working on it for 30 years. So that's
what it is. Yeah.
That's what it is. And I'm like, just put it on Bandcamp, and and it's got it's funny. And after I did that, I put out my new record.
Yeah, the Turning of the Bright World, the one that
the Turning of the Bright World, which I had this weird feeling about that record that it makes everything else I ever did look kind of shitty, which is like, because I was really I look at the drug years as kind of like Watsuit Page. It's like there is not a lot of people that just for 8 years every single night worked by themselves relentlessly. There's just it's sort of its own thing that you can't compare it to a lot of things. And so I really had it on a pedestal. I was really super proud of it. It was like my masterpiece, top this, right? And then I feel like I just blew it out of the water with the new record because it's just better. I don't know. I feel that's just how I feel right now. So that's a weird.
When that's your latest work, that's a great feeling. I mean, that's great. I mean, as much as perspective and time when you get
Conan, no one gives a crap about some old guy's newest record. They really don't. They don't. I mean, I'll say I've had some great response, and I've had a few people that I really care about that really like it. It's actually been good, to be honest with you. But we've talked for an hour and a half, and now we're talking about the old guy's new record, and it's more that just the weird, strange feeling of going, God, if I would have put this record out right after the Screamers,
yeah, right, like 1980 or something, yeah. I mean,
or something that's good. I mean, this is definitely an old person's record, which was kind of cool thing. So I've kind of talked about this a little bit in interviews, but punk rock is about being authentic. It's not poster. We call those people posers when our instincts tell us that they're fake, right?
Right.
So for me, I had to go, what is the piano nerd who's been doing this for 50 years? What does he sound like when he's not being fake? You gotta, I had to really, and it's the truth is you start thinking about dying, and you start thinking about just not responding with rage to things, responding with finding joy in the mundane, and some of these things that we never would have written about. We never would have written about them when we were young and angry and fucked up. And could it still be cool and not just embarrassing? Is it possible? Can it be done? That's the challenge,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's especially when art is a big part of your life. I suppose you may find value in singing about the same things and playing songs about the same things when you were 20 or later in life, but you use your perspective and you can think about things differently and think things deeper. Especially you mentioned sometimes with more clarity, right? Like especially
Well, it's different perspective for sure. But yeah, to dare to say, okay, look, I'm writing from the end of my life, from the beginning. And if I'm honest, that's what you have to listen to. That's what I've got to do. And is it wiser? No, because there's a wisdom, dude. I hear 16 and 17-year-olds. I hear Billie Eilish, and I hear, my God, Phoebe Bridgers and Connor Oberst when they're 18, just saying things that my jaw drops at the wisdom that drips from their lips. The truth is, it just took me a really long time to feel like I could even hold a candle to what some of those people do when they're kids. I'm a late bloomer. I'm a late bloomer. That's what I think. Luckily I did some cool stuff playing in some of these bands, like with Nina and the Screamers, where I got to, people have to hear my name, and I got to do some stuff that I think mattered. But I don't think I really was able to find any solutions where you hear a song and you go, that's kind of the answer, isn't it? It might be an answer you can't put your finger on. It might not be so preachy that you can say, oh, Paul says I should do this. Well, that's not what I mean. I just mean where you just go, okay, I agree. I don't know what he said, but I agree. That kind of shit.
right. Like the intrinsic aspect of the creative art, be like, yeah, that's yes. And then
like G.G. Allen, G.G. Allen. Like, I don't know what he says, what he's saying, but I agree. Like, for me, I never did actually agree with G.G. Allen, but some people,
like
some
what he was
people,
saying was mostly garbage, frankly, if you ask me. But
right? But some people, it's not about what he says. It's like that level of commitment to scatology or whatever it was that he really was. That's what they're looking for in their art. I can't deliver that. I don't want to deliver. That's not who I am. But fuck, take it as far as you can take it. Be as true to yourself as you can be.
What kind of things do you think you've picked up from like playing with all these different musicians over the years? Like what specific things have you learned from like playing with these different folks? Because it's been such a wide variety of people and a wide variety of personalities in some cases.
I just read this the other day, the answer to this question, and I thought, oh, that's cheesy, and that says nothing. But actually, it's exactly these people believe in themselves unquestioningly. They believe in themselves. They have their own vision, and they believe in their own vision. And for me, I guess that's what took me so long to with Twisted Roots, we did have this vision of what we were trying to do, but about like this death trip fucking is too fucking rough. Like, we're 23. Do we really want to commit to the death trip? Oh, that's a good vision. Yeah. But someone like Nina Hagen, and look, I am really committed to the ambiguous, and I am committed to uncertainty. So I really think right around the time you think you settle on the answer, you're going to find out you're an asshole in very short order. You're going to, and I love finding out I'm wrong, because you know what? When I find out I'm wrong, I'm not as wrong as I was 5 minutes ago. So it's kind of hard to walk through life like a Nina Hagen or a Tommy Gear or a Jello Biafra, so certain, Pat the Bunny, who's an artist I recorded, who I've had such amazing respect for. And he sang unflinchingly from the anarchist perspective in Ramshackle Glory and Johnny Hobo and all these things. And he was an iconic figure, the Bob Dylan of his generation for a certain group of people. And at 27 years old, at 23, he got sober. And 5 years later, he said, I don't believe in any of this stuff anymore. And I can't sing these songs anymore. And in fact, I don't even want to be a musician anymore. And he walked away from it. And so it's that certainty in yourself, which is really a false certainty a lot of the time, and dangerous. You're actually a propagandist, but these people somehow they believe they really believe, and it's messed up because then you'll get some person who believes in themselves completely and it doesn't work for them. So
right. Exactly. And it doesn't fly and no one else cares. And it's
so what have I learned? I would say, never give up, stay with it, work ethic, and some of these people are completely lazy. Some of these people, like right at the key moment of their career where they could take off, they get fucked up and don't show up for the fucking show. So
yeah.
I can't say that, that's not true. I would say that life is, I'm reading a great book by Robert Sapolsky called Behave, and he's a neurobiologist, and it's like how the brain works, and it's about behavior. It's very, very dry and academic, but he's also really, really funny. And like what I'm really learning is how complicated people are. Complicated.
Yes.
We ask super simple questions, and we give super simple answers. But below those simple questions, simple answers is neurobiology, which is incomprehensible and amazing.
Well, yeah, and you never know until you ask too. I mean, that's the other thing. Like if you you never know what depths, never know what challenges people are having. You never know what epiphanies they may have within.
Their people are really different, but they are passionate and committed to their stuff. And I'd say you have to be passionate and committed to what you're doing, whether you're playing with somebody else or if you're doing your own thing. And then it's kind of out of all of our hands. I will say nowadays, and this is something I'm wrestling with, the people that get the most attention are the people who are passionate and committed to making noise on social media. They have a love for that, and they are good at it, and they're, which for me, I'm like less and less like that. I'm becoming more and more retiring, and I have less and less inkling to do that. And I have to sort of wonder if, but if you're really good at, I tell people when they walk out of the studio, like, now what? I say, now, if you care, you have to be as dedicated and devoted to promoting yourself as you were to making this music. And if not, you made this music for yourself, which is a noble,
which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
Absolutely. Noble task. Or you have to, and even now, even if you are committed to that and enjoy that and love that pursuit of likes and attention, you still may not get it, only because there's such a glut of art now.
It's pretty much luck of the draw to even connect with anyone.
You may connect with 5 people or 10 people. Can you be satisfied with that? Can you remember you did it because you had to do it? There was no choice. You were going to do it no matter what. So, I mean, before you came, I had an hour. I was writing a crazy piano piece because Shaitan and I are going to do a classical album next year.
Nice.
She came to me 5 years ago and she said, I want to do orchestral music. And I was like, we went to the Hollywood Bowl and we saw Holst's The Planets, and it was pretty cheesy and like, okay, I can do this. I could probably write something like this, like, Carmina Burana and like that. But then there was an opening band before Holst and the conductor was named Daniel Bjarnason, and he was debuting a violin concerto that was written in 2017. And I was like, oh fuck, this is what music sounds like that's written now. And if I write this now, it can't sound like it was written in 1940 or 1890. It's got to write like this shit. Like, oh my God. So I've been trying to write shit like that, which is so crazy hard and difficult. And then I send it to poor Jatan, and she has to write words and sing to it.
Yeah.
And I'm writing it, so it never repeats. It's always morphing and evolving, and it's never in the same tempo beat. And there's no melody, or the melody is like, oh, there's a melody. Oh no, it's not. It's gone. And the harmony's dissonant. And it's so. She's coming in next week, and instead of me just throwing her to the wolves like I deliberately did for the first 5 years, we're going to sit down and I'm going to include myself in the nightmare process of creating the libretto and how to sing to this music. But I'm really excited. I played it for a few people and they're like, oh my God, this is the best thing you've ever done. And I'm like, that's weird, but it is weird that you say that, but it's really flat out like just cacophonous, but orchestra music. Like I have to not allow myself to use distortions and echoes and any of the lo-fi and weird
Yeah, it's a
sampling.
completely different muscle group. They're not used to hearing that kind of thing and that kind of
Woo! It's hard, but it's fun.
So a couple more things. So first, and by the way, I'm going to link to the record. When we originally talked about having you on, it was Turning the Bright World had just come out, and it's still. I know that July is like 1,000 years ago now, in current timelines, but it's still a great record. I think people should check it out. I'm going to put it in the show notes. Fancy Space People. We didn't talk about Fancy Space People. Can you talk about how that came to pass?
What an amazing life and career I've had.
Yeah, you're one of those guys. There's like a million things to talk about.
The thing is, I got to record and be in Fancy Space People, and I know that the album that none of you guys will ever hear because Don will never finish it, which is so heartbreaking because I finished it twice already. Like the band broke up and Nora came to me and said, could you finish the recordings? I'm like, sure, Nora. So me and Nora finished the recordings. And it's like, I like to say it's the greatest album of the 21st century. The previous to that, it was the Deadbeat 6661313 album, the double album that none of you have ever heard because it was only released on double vinyl with a lenticular cover, mail order by Scott Guerin only. So that was so no one has ever heard it. Like, this is the story of my life. So the new greatest album of the 21st century is the Fancy Space People album, which I finished with Nora, which Don then came and said, no, it's good, but it's not right. So then we remixed it again because he was going with what's his name? The lo-fi singer-songwriter artist that Don works with. Him. The canceled guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's so canceled we can't even come up with his name.
Exactly.
That's messed up. You'll think of it. Anyway, he was going on Ariel Pink, right?
Ariel Pink. Yeah.
He was going on tour with Ariel Pink, and he said, well, I've got to have something to take. So I finished up this incredible thing, sent him off with it, but nope, he didn't get it done in time because Don is just as crazy as I am. And so twice I finished this record, and both times so majestic, so heartwarming, so insane, such classic Mott the Hoople, Ziggy Stardust meets Pink Floyd, I don't even know what. Just the most grandiose. So I'd be working on this music and we would be laughing, like usually people use grandiose as an insult, right? But you can get something so grandiose that it's just epic,
Yeah.
And then Fancy Space People album, which I doubt we'll ever be heard unless someone dies and the things get out. But there is an EP out. You can get a taste of the grandiosity if you go to song Fancy Space People by Fancy Space People, and you can get a taste of what that album is, how great it is. But you were going to ask about the tour opening for Smashing Pumpkins.
I actually was not going to ask about that. You can, if you have something you want to say about that, you can. I don't particularly.
I know we toured with Smashing Pumpkins. I haven't listened to much Smashing Pumpkins. So they were doing a beautiful set. Their fans were very angry because they wouldn't do any of the hits. And now later, he was a very odd guy, and I've heard very odd stuff about him. But we were playing this beautiful stuff, and his audience was like, "Billy, why are you making us listen to Fancy Space People? Please play your hits and don't do this to us." But we did it, and we wore our onesies. And after we got back, they kicked me out of the band, which was, I think they wanted to strip it down to 45 Grave also kicked me out of the band because honestly, I'm superfluous to these projects. But as a producer, I think I was more helpful because I actually got their recordings made.
Yeah, well, it's arguably more, especially if they let anyone listen to them, it'd be very important.
Yes, and then after I had been kicked out of the band for a few years, Don called me up and said, "Hey, you know those recordings that you made? Can we?" So we're all, I'm making one of the things I try to do. I'm working on this thing because I think this is very punk rock, and I read it somewhere about having no grievances, about living your life with no grievances. It's kind of a crazy thing to try to do, like no grievances about, anything, like, the tsunami or like the MAGA, no grievances. I got no problem with anything. And people get very furious with me. But guys, it's a thought experiment. Don't get carried away. It's not like I'm successful at this stuff. I would imagine that if you feel schadenfreude for, the defeat of like fascism, you still have a grievance against fascism. I'm not seeing I'm successful about it. But when it comes to something as cheesy and minors being kicked out of a band and then asked to rejoin the band, and that sort of drama and rising above those sort of grievances, it's a place to start.
Paul, this has been awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing this. It took us a while to get it together, but
did it? No, we started on time, didn't we?
No, I mean, it took us a while. Well, originally I was going to have you on July. That's what I'm talking about. But
oh, yeah. No, it's been really fun, man. Really fun.
So deeply appreciative of you, very giving of your time. Obviously, we could probably go on for a few more hours, but at some point,
it would get so highly technical that nobody would be on the phone. I really appreciate your questions are fantastic. Thank you for your knowledge and staying on top of all this stuff. Good job.
Brother. Last thing, this is the only canned question I ever ask, and you can choose to interpret it however you like.
Shit. Okay.
Why do you do what you do?
Oh, probably some childhood trauma that I'm like living out repeatedly. How's that?
That's good.
and I love it. And I love it because I'm working out my issues.
Right. And in some cases, this is your musically. In some cases, maybe less.
Oh, they're not music. The issues are no doubt way more serious and that's what you get for asking canned questions.
Well, I like to hear how people answer, and so does the audience. So
I always watch those canned questions, and I watch people answer them really glibly, and they're really funny. And I'm like, oh, I dread when it's my turn. So I dread it, but I did okay. I did.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
You did awesome, man.
Good job, man. All right.
Paul, thanks so much. Take care.
It's been fun. Talk soon.
All right, there you go. Take care. Oh, there he goes. Paul Roessler. What a cool guy, man. What an awesome dude. I hope you guys enjoyed that far-ranging discussion for sure. And we didn't get to a bunch of stuff, and that's just the way it goes sometimes. I think that everyone should go to Paul's Bandcamp, which we didn't even talk about that. There's a 1, so it's paulroessler1.bandcamp.com after it. I'll put it in the show notes so everyone can check it out. Let's just hear. This is a first song on The Turning of the Bright World, and this is Elephant Man. there's Paul with Elephant Man. Go get that. That is on the Bandcamp, the Paul Roessler one, bandcamp.com. Again, it'll be in the show notes so you can find it, or you can just use your Google foo if you feel so inclined. Turning in the Bright World. That would be the second song, and that's not what I'm trying to do right now. As beautiful as it is, I don't want to hear it. Thanks so much for listening to the show. The name of the show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. Appreciate you listening to it. You can find this show on RadioDope.com, streaming on YouTube and Twitch as well. We got a double. So nice they played it twice. ProtonicReversal.com for the archives. Always free. No ads. No sponsors. No kidding. But if you like the show and want to get episodes sooner, you can achieve that goal very easily by going to patreon.com/ProtonicReversal and giving $1 a month. $1 a month will gladly achieve that very achievable goal. Thanks everyone for sharing the episodes around, liking, sharing, subscribing is also free. It's a free show. Sharing around, posting a review, that's people find it. All that stuff helps people find the show, and it's just a darn nice thing to do, really. And I appreciate everybody listening. There's going to be next 2 weeks going to be off. I'm playing musics myself, but we got some great stuff coming up. Got some rescheduled stuff that's coming up. There's a bunch of stuff that's coming up, and please stay tuned to it. And just appreciate having you around.
This microphone turns sound into electricity.
Take care of yourself, everyone.
Can you hear me now? Out on Route 128, the dark and lonely.
Check you later.
I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on Earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? This is a test! If this had been a real emergency, hey, hey!